Institute for Intellectual Property and Social Justice. And also, we do a lot of work with our community outreach, right? And so, Take Creative Control is our community outreach initiative. And one of the things, I'm going to be honest with everyone here, this panel was built very selfishly by me because one of the things that I really, 2020, with us all being, at home and interacting virtually, I became increasingly interested in what was happening in our AR, VR communities, which led to me having some really amazing and interesting conversations with Lauren Ruffin, who's on our panel today, and wanting to think about how these different communities can be both a wonderful and amazing way for people to connect, but also being mindful of some of the problems and challenges that we may be facing as we try to ensure safe and inclusive spaces for marginalized communities. So again, I decided that I wanted to bring folks who both inspire me and make me think a lot harder on how it is that we can support and create these type of environments and experiences. And my theory, and what I'm hoping to kind of flesh out today and figure out, is that I believe that it's by investing and protecting and promoting the AR, VR developers, the content creators, all of these folks that are from diverse communities, because then we're actually able to start baking these values into the actual environments. And so I just want to introduce my panelists with that point made. First is Lauren Ruffin. And Lauren, I just want to tell you guys, not only is she kind of been an inspiration for me thinking about this work a lot more thoughtfully, but also, we partnered this past year on creating a virtual reality space for us to bring people together and have conversations similar to the one that we're about to have today. So, she's a fantastic partner in crime. Lauren is co-founder of Crux with 20 years experience in policy, marketing, fundraising, and strategic planning. She is a frequent speaker on best practices and leveraging immersive storytelling to combat racial and economic justice. In addition to her work with Crux, she serves as CEO for Fractured Atlas, the nation's largest association for artists and creators. Thanks for being here today, Lauren. Next is Alton Glass. Alton is the co-founder and chief executive officer of GRX Immersive Labs, a creative technology studio and R&D lab specializing in multi-platform immersive media and content strategy. Alton is an award-winning creator with a demonstrated history of working in the entertainment industry and skilled in virtual reality, augmented reality, film, and television content creation. And lastly, we have Joe Drayton. Joe is a first-chair trial lawyer who has represented the nation's largest enterprises in competitive and strategic litigation involving varied forms of technology. Joe's mission as a lawyer is to find solutions to issues, disputes plaguing clients. Joe's practice background includes a broad range of intellectual property and complex commercial matters, including patent litigation, trademark and copyright usage, trade dress, design patents, and false advertising. Thanks for being here today, Joe. So I'm just going to cut to it, right, and just try to leave as much time as possible for questions. And I'm going to start with you, Lauren. So for those of us in the room who are still learning about augmented and virtual realities, I'm going to throw a few definitions at you, and I want you to let me know how close I'm getting to, like, how good are these definitions? How do I have it? Do I not have it? So the first one is augmented reality. It's a technology that overlays virtual content on the real world environment. Examples of existing AR systems include Nintendo's Pokemon Go, IKEA's Place app, and photo and video filter apps like Instagram and Snapchat.
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on. And I know we have a couple other definitions. First, I want to say thank you for inviting me here. I have a law degree. I went to the hustle, so super stoked to be,
I know.
doing this. It's my first CLE. I never practiced, so I'm like, I'm super stoked, right? So
see,
yeah,
no better place than home.
Exactly. It's kind of like, it's really special. But I think you're spot on there in terms of thinking about, augmented reality being opportunities to take to take graphics, to take people holograms and place them into your real world environment. And that's sort of what most of us on this call are probably most familiar with for folks who don't have a headset at home.
And then, so my next one is virtual reality. Virtual reality is a technology that immerses users into a completely virtual environment. Examples of existing VR systems include Oculus Rift, PlayStation VR, and HTC Live.
Exactly. So VR is a totally virtual, a totally immersive environment. We're fortunate to have Alton here, who is a frequent collaborator of mine and probably the most well-known Black director. He is the godfather of Black VR. I got better. I used to call you the grandfather, but you know. So yeah, I mean, if anyone, we're so fortunate to have Alton, to have Alton's work, because you know, without that, we wouldn't ever have an opportunity to go into an experience that really resonates for our communities and touches across so many of the cross-policy issues that that Black and Brown people face in the United States and around the world.
Yeah, and so with this understanding, with this foundation, what are some of the challenges you're seeing in creating inclusive and accessible experiences for marginalized communities?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we're at the very nascent stages of this immersive storytelling movement. The biggest problem, and you know, I'm sure Alton and Joe can chime in on this if they want to, is you know, we're kind of operating in isolation in terms of thinking about, you know, when industries develop, the way that Black and Brown people are able to carve out our niche generally is, you know, with a combination of capital flooding into the space. And government/legislative support that makes sure that we have an opportunity to thrive. And that doesn't really happen in any sort of professionalized way in the XR space. So that would be the big one for me. There's also just tons of intellectual property issues that we're rife with. You know, most, you know, city, state governments aren't thinking about it. Most certainly there hasn't been a lot of federal regulation around what could happen in immersive spaces and around how we're using, you know, taking it a step out to sort of AI and responsible tech considerations. You know, I don't think we're quite there to make sure that our intellectual property as Black creators is really protected.
No, I think I love that. And I think you're right. I'm going to bring that to Joe in a second. But before I go there, Alton, I wanted to talk to you about, well, kind of building on the insights that Lauren just kind of laid out for us. What role do you feel that diverse developers and content creators play in ensuring inclusive environments in AR and VR?
Well, just to tie back into what she mentioned about how traditional industries, you know, have
I think we lost
Alton,
Alton.
I think
Can you hear
he's
me?
back.
Okay, yeah,
We lost you for a second, Alton.
Okay, what did I cut off at?
Your first sentence.
Oh, I was saying tying back into what you mentioned about how we traditionally used to get funding. But what's interesting was different companies would create urban departments or urban divisions in companies for our content, right? But now we have an opportunity to create from the ground up, and that diversity is needed because we can create what this industry should look like, as opposed to here's your urban division, right? What does that ecosystem look like from all points of view? So we're not actually asking for a seat at the table, we're creating a new table in the immersive economy with XR and VR and so forth. So I think that's going to be very pivotal for us to have those diverse voices at the beginning. Like you said, it's a nascent medium. So we're almost essentially like when the film industry first started 100 years ago, when someone, the Lumiere brothers took a camera and said, okay, we're going to create one shot or black and white. We're at that very beginning stage. So we have an opportunity to build what that ecosystem looks like. And I think that's a very beautiful part about now with law and ethics and design and practices put in place to protect those artistic rights and figure out what this looks like from our point of view as a whole ecosystem.
No, I think that's right. And it's literally having the opportunity to build it and build it in a way that's more equitable for the actual creators and the developers and in all of those communities. And so, Joe, I was curious. I want your legal eyes on some of these issues. Lauren mentioned all of the really interesting copyright and even trademark issues that are coming up, and the way that AR/VR really does put forth some interesting questions about originality. What are some of the legal issues that you're seeing kind of percolate up in this space? And do you foresee them disparately impacting, you know, creators of color and developers of color?
Try to figure out where to begin. So when we talk about intellectual property, you have different buckets, and I think all of the buckets kind of impact virtual reality and augmented reality. So the first bucket would be technology and how do you protect it, and I'll focus on patents, and I'll try to be brief. I can elaborate as necessary, but the bottom line is that the patents are going to protect certain technological advances in this space. And so the headset is obviously something that could be patented and protected by patents that was mentioned, be it the Oculus headset or another headset. And so, but even as you start to use these devices that are out there and these platforms, I think some of the content developers are going to want to push the platforms to do more. And I think you get technological advances there that people don't realize are technological advances. And so they share their needs with the platform, and then the platform people, they modify the platform to accommodate content developers. And I think that exchange is one that you have to really focus on. You identify a need, well, that's innovation. And can that innovation be protected before you ask for whatever changes you want to ask for in connection with the technology? And I would just, that's an example, because I think that a lot of times people underestimate their contribution to ecosystems, and everybody plays a role in these types of ecosystems. But as far as patents are concerned, it really depends, because budgets matter when folks are creative and they're in the early stages of development. And so patent protection can be, there is a barrier to entry. I mean, what I think people should focus on is, can they put something on file to protect their ideas and concepts? And sometimes the creative world, they're not really focused on these types of things. And so you can overlook value. And I think it's important to have an attorney by your side along the way, so that the attorney can periodically audit for value and determine if you have something that you, I walked someone through that the other day who's very creative, created something in light of COVID. And I said, well, wait a second, I think you do have something to protect here, but let's drill down on it. So that's a process in of itself, but there's cost concerns relating to filing patents. You're not automatically going to get a patent. There's somewhat of the unknown as to what's come before, which can be drawn by analogy, et cetera, et cetera. That's one example. But getting something on file is critically important, because first to file in the United States now. So if you can memorialize or preserve your intellectual property, you can build and expand upon it within 1 year of filing a provisional application in the patent office, so to speak. So that's one intellectual property issue. The other issues that exist is, just talk about copyrights, for example. It's going to be tough, because virtual reality kind of tries to mimic reality. And so in mimicking reality, we're going to be copying things that are out there. So it will give rise to copyright infringement. And whether, if you have a room and a certain art in the room and you're depicting the art, tattoos on individuals is a big thing now, and whether you have rights there or not. And so those are the types of issues that come up. I'll stop for now and can further elaborate. I don't want to take up all the time. I will say that I'm very interested in Lauren and Alton fleshing out their comments as to why there's an opportunity here. And I recognize it's a young industry, but what's the opportunity in the entry points for people of color? Because I think our lawyers would want to learn a little bit more about that, and how we go about finding, and embracing talent at the right points in time.
I'll hop in, Joe, because something you said is something that's at the forefront of my mind over the last year or so. You know, my company works really closely with large platforms to onboard. You know, we have probably the largest community of black and brown creators in the immersive space, and we're frequently asked for our thoughts on hardware builds and software builds and how these platforms function. And I've been really reluctant to engage deeply in those relationships, even though I know that it's in our best interest to build in these features, functionality, safety, security, because I understand how that's going to be monetized on the other side. And I think that's just, I think that's the heart of your issue is I think there are a number of companies who recognize that having Black and brown people in the room making these decisions at the front end is the way they're going to build a broader base of consumers, but they don't want to compensate us for it. And I think that's the rub in terms of where the opportunities are. I mean, the storytellers, and I'm someone who spends time at Sundance, Tribeca, you know, in terms of the big film festivals, the stories that we're telling are, one, they actually are stories. They're not just technologists showing off what the tech can do. They have plot, they have characters, they're really thoughtful and really resonate culturally in terms of aesthetic and style. And they're fully developed stories within the immersive space that we're going to look back on in 100 years and realize that Black people actually determined how VR and AR are functioning and how it can be used. So that to me is the opportunity. You know, in the last year, I've never regretted not being barred more because there's a desperate need for representation for Black and brown creators, because we really are giving a lot in the space. We're punching way above our weight limit, but we're not being compensated, and that's across all digital media. That's, you know, I saw some data around Black influencers. You know, your top level Black influencers, or I think I saw data, it was like they're making $1,500 a year doing it, and white influencers making $250,000 a year doing it. So as we dig throughout just not AR, VR, but like digital media, we're losing out on money right now, and that's partially because, you know, people aren't represented and there's no framework for what our value is yet.
I'll just kind of tie back to that's one, like you said, the technology itself, right? But then going back to Joe about what you mentioned, it's an ecosystem, right? So if you look back, you know, historically, we've never actually we built ecosystems prior to integration, right? And we were self-sustainable. So now you look at, you know, the traditional entertainment industry, tech industry, we become a part of those ecosystems. So now I feel like what's great about XR is that we have an opportunity to build a new ecosystem, and that will require the technologists, the creators, the artists, so that we can build and protect each other's interests in this full-on ecosystem. You know, so when you look at something like ecosystem like Silicon Valley, and you look at an app like, tying back to what Laura said about faces, or we become a part of something, but it's not equitable. Look at something like Clubhouse. Clubhouse is now went from $100 million valuation to $1 billion valuation, but who's on there bringing the culture to the application? Black people, right? So, but we have no ownership in that. So with people like, you know, yourself, you know, lawyers and technologists, you can say, hey, why couldn't we have built this overnight and now bring your audience here, and now you have $100 million evaluation for a tech company that's either Black owned, and you start building on this ecosystem. So those are the things that I think is important about immersive technology and the immersive ecosystem. I no longer just call it, you know, like a VR. You know, I look at it from a standpoint of building an actual ecosystem.
And so, oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was going to say, you know, that makes perfect sense. I think in a way, capital, you know, in thinking about this, I just thought about how much we're in need of capital to sort of invest in some of these ideas and concepts and bring them to life. Because I think what resonates is it's not just about first mover advantage. I think one of the points is we bring a cultural advantage. So we don't have to necessarily move first, but when we move, there's going to be impact. And that's something worth investing in. And then I hear the need for really funding for legal advice, and even funding to protect intellectual property. And so no different you invest early stage investment in any kind of endeavor, we probably need more early stage investment around the protection of intellectual property, which for some would probably be a small investment, but it could pay huge dividends the same way VC investments across multiple concepts pay dividends over time.
Yeah.